Hi, everyone. My name is Barbra Dillon. I am the editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press, and I'm honored to be here for this Comic-Con at Home panel to discuss what entices these wonderfully talented panelists to the dark side of art, what inspires their creative processes, and how they have embraced and applied the darker sides of life to telling new stories that will inspire, impact, and connect with readers. I'd like to go ahead and jump into the introductions of our panelists. First, we have Susan Lee, who is the founder of Women on the Dark Side, which has become a perennial panel on the convention circuit, as well as an independent film festival highlighting female creators. Susan is also a writer and illustrator with credits including Wraith of Love and Shadow of the Night. Her latest endeavor is the Embrace the Chaos tour, during which she embarked on a nationwide journey in her self-built teardrop trailer, documenting her progress and experiences throughout. Hello, Susan.
Hello, thank you so much for everybody being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Susan. We also are joined by Chelsea Cain, who is the author of the New York Times best-selling Archie Sheridan Gretchen Lowell thriller series and the Kick Lanigan book, One Kick. Her Portland-based thrillers have been published in over 30 languages, recommended on The Today Show, and appeared in episodes of HBO's True Blood and ABC's Castle. Stephen King included 2 of her books in his top 10 favorite books of the year, and NPR named Heartsick one of the best 100 thrillers ever written. One Kick was adapted into the 12-episode TV show Gone, and Chelsea is the author of Dharma Girl, Confessions of a Teen Sleuth, and several other books and comic books, including Mockingbird, Maneaters, and Spy Island. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, it's great to be here.
We are also joined by Maria Alexander, who is the Bram Stoker Award-winning author of horror and dark fantasy stories, including Mr. Wicker and Snowed. She is also the author of the Bloodline of Yule trilogy, as well as a produced screenwriter, games writer, visual world designer, award-winning copywriter, and poet. Hello, Maria.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And of course, we are last but not least joined by Janet Joyce Holden, who is the author of the Origins of Blood vampire series, the Carousel series, and a number of short stories, which can be found in various anthologies. She is also an active member of the Horror Writers Association. Janet, thank you for joining us.
Oh, great. Nice to be here. Oh,
I love your dead unicorn. That is so cool. Your dead unicorn video is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just saying it out loud.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone on the panel, we're going to be talking a lot today about dark content. So I find that it helps for our viewers to really define that. When we talk about dark content, what does that mean to you? And what sense does that evoke both as a fan and as a creator? Janet, why don't we start with you?
Okay, dark content. It's for me, it's number one, it's the unknown. Things that perhaps make you uneasy, that aren't necessarily all out scary, but maybe a little uncomfortable, fearful. I think sometimes we tend to shy away from it to our detriment, because it's with us all throughout our lives. So, I think sometimes it's a good idea to dive in and explore. So that's what I do with some of my writing.
Absolutely. And Chelsea, what about you? How do you define dark content?
That was a really good definition. It's the stuff we think but don't say. It's the stuff that, like when we read it in a book, say, we feel a little nervous that, there's that moment of like, I can't believe she's saying that. And it is, it is the, the verboten, it is the taboo, and whether it is like us, whether it is sex or violence, or even just a kind of intimacy or something that, somebody says, there is something about it that feels taboo, that feels a little subversive. That's how I would define it. But I also I had no idea that I was so macabre until people started telling me I was. So maybe I had a radar for that.
Maria, what about you?
Wow. I mean, I don't know what to add to all of this. I mean, because that's exactly how I would have defined it too, is whatever is taboo, the things that people don't want to talk about typically, to say to bring it to another area. One of my expertise is astrology, and the 8th house which traditionally was ruled by Scorpio, rules sex and death. So all of those eighth house things that which to Chelsea's earlier point when we had an earlier discussion speaks to that intimacy. There is an intimacy to these things that we don't want to talk about. You have to have an intimacy, and so that darkness does connect us with our readers in a deeper way. So that's how I look at all that eighth house stuff. And Mars, which is also associated with Scorpio, is that rules violence and sex. So there you go. It's all there.
And Susan, anything that you want to add?
It's all of that, and I think it's the emotions, because to me, dark content usually stuff that explores emotions that we're not willing to bring out into the open, whether it's anger, fear, discomfort. I think intimacy is a great way to put it. We shy away sometimes from the intimate connections we share with people, and so that can feel very uncomfortable, even if it isn't horror-based or really scary and frightening. It can be dark and uncomfortable when we have to face what we feel and how we feel, especially when we get into deep conversations with people we love. We don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations. So I think that's part of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And for each of you, again, I want the audience to learn about you both as creators and as fans. So was there something, whether it be a movie, a book, a specific creator that really informed your understanding or interest in darker sides of entertainment? Susan, why don't we start with you this time?
Well, when I was a late teenager, as I was turning 18, the film All That Jazz came out. And I was living in Winnipeg, which is a small city in Canada, and we didn't get a lot of exposure to a lot of things. And I went to see that movie, and it blew my mind because it was so different and so unusual to have like the angel of death be this beautiful seductress leading Bob Fosse over to to encouraging him practically to die. And that film imprinted me, I think, as a director. As a writer, I grew up reading a lot of Stephen King. My parents were very open with anything I wanted to read. And I was reading Stephen King at like 10 and 12. And The Shining was remarkable in that I felt like I could feel every moment of it and hear every moment of it. And I think it really impacted me in a way that not much other literature I read at that time really stuck with me.
Chelsea, what about you?
My mom, when I was really little, before I could read, took me to see a lot of foreign films because it was easier than leaving me at home paying for a babysitter. So she would just take me along. So she would read the subtitles to me in the back of the theater, which I'm sure was incredibly annoying in retrospect to everybody else. I would like to issue an apology to them, but I think it fed my imagination in the sense that it revealed these stories that I was not equipped to, really kind of internalize or extrapolate, but I could feel like that there were these things that were happening that I didn't understand, and I wanted to know more. And then as I got older, my mom would go see movies and wouldn't take me if she felt like they were too adult or inappropriate in some way. But then she would come home and she would tell me the whole story of the movie. And my mother was a really wonderful storyteller. And so she would tell the whole story with the whole banjo accompaniment and dancers. It was a whole big, an hour and a half before bed, and I was just totally gripped by it. And there are movies that still sometimes I will see and I'll think I think I've seen this before, and then I have to think no, maybe my mom just told me about this one. But I guess that notion that there was something other, something beyond my access made me want to chase that. And my mother, there were movies she didn't want me to see and TV shows she didn't want me to see. There was never any censorship of books. That was always, you can read whatever you feel you're ready for, because books, there's intimacy. It's just it's one-on-one, right? It's you and the book, and you can skim, right, a scene if you're not ready for it. and you can move to a safe space, right? If you feel unsafe in a scene, it's just a really different dynamic. And so I was able to explore, I think, certainly like you, Susan, like the books that could get me to that place long before I was able to experience, other kinds of like visual storytelling.
And Maria, what about you? Anything that really ignited your interest in the darker sides of entertainment?
So I have an older half brother who's 17 years older than I am. And when he moved in, I was 3 years old, and he moved back in with my family after he'd been through boot camp. My parents had left me with a babysitter when they went out, and he was appalled to find me with a babysitter. And so he fired the babysitter, and he invited all his friends over, and they were watching The Fly as they took turns holding me in their lap.
Oh my
we're
God.
talking about the original Fly. And mostly it was his girlfriend, who's been his wife his whole life. So she, my sister-in-law Nancy, she was the one holding me in her lap, and I just heard that, "Help me!" And I saw it, and I remember like going, oh, and like burying my face in her. But it was, it terrified me, but it definitely sparked something, and later, just growing up in sort of a dark household, a lot of violence, a lot of but also a lot of spooky stuff happened in my childhood. That really kind of carried that along, as opposed to just traumatizing me. It molded and grew what had started that early.
And Janet, what about you?
For me, it started early with fairy stories. I mean, my granddad used to tell me all the Hans Christian Andersen and Brothers Grimm stuff. So, we had children getting lost in the woods, children being kidnapped by the Snow Queen. We had children being eaten by the big bad wolf, all that kind of thing. I think British TV too, we had all the Doctor Who stuff, which was very, very scary for a young kid. All the early things anyway, things like the Cybermen and the Yetis and all that kind of thing. There was a short, I think it was German film that they played constantly on TV called The Singing Ringing Tree. That was terrifying. I mean, I look at it now on YouTube and it's like, but back then, when you're a kid, it's like, oh boy, this is frightening. So, you go on from there. And I think the thing is, tied up with all this scary stuff is a lot of magic and a lot of fantastic things, which I think to a child are quite, you want to know more. You want to go into that forest. You want to go into that secret passageway. It's so there was all that. And of course you pick up Stephen King's books as a teenager, and those were awesome. And I think as an adult, Clive Barker took it to another level. So yeah, the dark and the fantastic.
And I think it's important to understand that with scary stories comes people being brave, right?
Yeah,
that's a big part of scary stories. So
yeah, absolutely. And now to turn towards the creative end of things rather than the fan end of things, when we talk about the creative process, we often consider the introspective nature of how art affects or defines its creator. So for each of you, as you confront and call upon these dark corners of yourselves or of your mind in creating new content, do you feel that it is somewhat of an unhealthy process, a necessary evil to bring about great art? Or do you feel that it provides an opportunity to resolve the darkness that lies within? Maria, why don't we start with you this time?
I mean, it depends on the project. Certainly, I can think of times where it did become unhealthy and where I needed to put it down. Other times it's completely cathartic, something that I really needed to do, like my first short story, The King of Shadows. I mean, dark, yes. Boy, I cried my eyes out when it was done, when I finished writing it. And it's still, but that was very healthy. It was very cathartic to have. It gave me, I had an epiphany writing that story that was very important to my own healing as a person. I think that, so that's where it lies for me. It just sort of depends on the project.
And Susan?
It's a little bit of both. When I'm directing or making a film, it's a lot of me trying to draw personal things out of my actors and out of the people around me. And that's always an interesting exploration. I leave it up to the actors as to how open they want to be with their personal feelings. So I try to be very careful when I'm working with somebody else, trying to draw out something that suits the content. For myself, when I'm writing, it's kind of like Maria said, a lot of times, like the new novel I'm working on, there's a lot of passages in there I think are going to get cut because I think they were a lot of cathartic. It was a lot of things that I was working through, especially exploring loneliness and that kind of thing. And there are things that I did. I sat and, sobbed over my computer in the coffee shop and hoped nobody would see me sitting there, tears streaming down my face. But a lot of that, as I'm writing, I realized I need to get it out so that I can get to the core of the character. And I do understand that a lot of that's probably going to have to be cut. I have learned where it is not cathartic. And those are things that I back away from exploring when I'm creating, because I try to think that my creativity is not the place to explore those really difficult things. If it is something that hurts when I write or is really difficult, then that's something I need to exercise outside of the creative space and maybe, talk to a therapist or talk to a good friend and work through that separately.
Janet, what about you?
Well, for me, for me, it's more about a sense of adventure, diving into these things and, facing difficult things, horrible things, fighting your way through and hopefully, overcoming at the end of it. So I have a fairly positive mentality when I'm going into a story, despite how bad it gets, we will overcome. And, a lot of my characters go through a lot of changes, some of them physical, but they learn to cope and hopefully, they don't sink without trace at the end of it. So, and that's me too, I think I'm, as in, out there in the world, sometimes you get thrown down a hole and you've no control and you've got to deal with it the best way you can. So I try to reflect that and do that when I'm writing.
And Chelsea, what about you?
I love murdering people. I do. I don't feel bad about it at all. It certainly does not haunt me. It's super fun. It's a story, and I write about cops and serial killers, and so it is by nature. I might feel different if it were some kind of domestic story that felt a little closer to home, but it feels, fantastical by nature, and I have such fun just trying to figure out how to kill people in new ways. I'm running out of them. If anybody has ideas. And then just trying to think, so if a scalpel is cutting open a nose, would the nose peel open like an eggplant or an orange? That's what I'm doing during the day. And it feels great. And at the end of the day, I've written a scene. I feel good about it. It is a story.
And continuing on that idea, are there challenges that you face as creators in whether it be killing off characters or simply developing the character, their world? What challenges or barriers do you run into when going through your creative process? Susan, why don't we start with you this time?
I think I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to my creative process. I do the National Novel Writing Month every year where you write 50,000 words in 30 days. And they have an expression, whether you're a planner or a pantser. And a planner is someone who outlines and figures out everything before they go. And a pantser is literally fly by the seat of your pants. And I tend to write very instinctively and very much by the seat of my pants. And that's sometimes with the novel I'm doing right now. It's a very complicated thing that I've never written anything like this before. And I dove right in, and now I'm finding all the corners that I've painted myself into. So it's something that I have to sort of, right now I've just gotten sort of done the word vomit draft. So now I'm trying to go through and make sense of things and pull it apart and go, okay, I want to keep this and I want to keep this, but this chunk in the middle does not quite work. And I do find myself when I get stuck like that, I go to other authors or creators that I like and try to see how did they get around that. Or when I'm creating my comic book, I don't know what to do with this series of panels. So I'll go and grab something by, like Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips are two of my favorite creators. So I'll grab one of theirs and try to figure my way through it. But I think I'm my worst enemy because I don't plan enough. But I enjoy that because then my characters come to life and start speaking to me and lead me into places that I never thought about.
Janet, what about you?
Probably somewhat similar. I tend to sympathize a lot with my antagonists. I don't believe in doing a sort of cardboard cutout bad person that the good guys can just keep going at until they've destroyed them. I like to flesh them out and give them some humanity. And I think in doing that, sometimes the story tends to shift a little bit in their favor. It starts out as an adventure and, we're going to end up here, but, perhaps because of the antagonist's intervention and their influence on the story, it ends up somewhere else. But no, I don't care. As long as it's a good ride for me and hopefully a good ride for my readers, I don't mind.
And Chelsea?
Well, just it's like somebody who writes a series mostly. It is difficult sometimes. I have to remind myself that I am the boss. I am the queen of the world, and characters sometimes will talk back. Right? That happens. That's normal, right? You guys? Okay.
Oh yeah.
The character will say, like, are you going to stab me again? Like, you've stabbed me so many times. We're doing that again, right? Like, and I have to be like, yes, that is happening again now. And, I am the boss of this. All right. So, just lay back and think of England. And that's hard. I do feel like a relationship with these characters and empathy for them and, for their suffering that I put them through. But I also, sometimes you just need somebody to be stabbed by the second act.
True.
Maria, what about you?
Well, challenges and barriers. I mean, those change, again, this is gonna sound lame, according to the project. Right now, I'm writing a memoir, and memoir has vastly different challenges than writing fiction, vastly. I mean, we grow up telling stories as anecdotes, right, about our lives. And when it comes to bringing those anecdotes to life, you have to ground them the same way you would your fiction. You have to invoke smells and sounds and dialogue. And you create scenes out of things that you've grown up saying, hey, that time when my parents converted to Judaism and then they converted to Mormonism and then they converted, it's like, I could tell that story, but telling that story, like going into like what happened, it's very different. And you're also invoking memory, which, isn't reliable, granted, but you want to try to be reliable and you can't change. You really can't change what happened. You have to pretty much tell what happened. So that you're constrained in ways that you aren't. In fiction, you can just say, well, you could be like Chelsea says, the queen of your world, and and just change it. But when you're bringing to life your past, it's a very, and you have to take into consideration real people who are alive, real people who, how you protect them. Yeah, I will definitely have a legal review done of this book. Believe you me. It's a very different beast. And by the way, just to give you a heads up, it is a spiritual, supernatural memoir. So we're going into all kinds of woo stuff that's happened to me in my life. And I think that, you know, again, now we're getting to a point where, okay, is anybody going to believe me? And I have to say, I don't care. You know, I have to just move on. Like, I got to stab that character. You know, this is what happened. You just got to do it and move on. So I'd have to say fiction's been a lot easier to write than this.
That makes sense. Totally understandable. Well, I think that it is incumbent upon us to dive into a discussion of inclusion and representation when it comes to the artistic community, not only the stories and the characters that we are telling, but the creators who are telling them. It is very important that we have all facets that can really provide an impact to those that are reading or consuming them in some manner, because stories really do have a valuable impact on those that consume them. So for each of you, I'm curious, as creators, as queens of your own world, how do you go about inclusion with regard to your world, with regard to the characters that you create? And likewise, if you do have collaborators on the projects that you do, is that a consideration that you keep in mind as well? Chelsea, we'll start with you.
That is a big question, and I has like, so answering about the fiction that I do, like the thrillers, that is those are multiple point of view books. So to me, there's a difference between a point of view character and a supporting character, because I also feel like I don't feel like I have the personal authority, right, to tell the story of, you know, an immigrant story, or, you know, like a story that I think somebody else should be telling. So weirdly, I feel like I can tell the story of a middle-aged white cop guy somehow. But like, so there's a couple of points of view in those books. And then in the world, I really make an effort from the very beginning to populate it with lots of different kinds of people. And that means often whatever character comes to mind, thinking, okay, what's the opposite? Right? Because we're all products of our kind of cultural grooming. And, you know, like it's very easy to kind of cast somebody, you know, based on all of the TV shows I've ever seen about like what an Emmy looks like or whatever. And so like I make that exercise, you know, very much a part of my work, to just stop myself and ask, you know, what if it were somebody totally different than that?
Janet, what about you?
For me, I think, I mean, that you can't populate your novels with and take, you know, everybody in. You know, you have to pick a few characters, and I think sometimes I think you can switch roles. You know, traditional male roles can become female, that kind of stuff, or they can be male with a twist or something like that. I think it's again, what Chelsea said about populating your stories with a wide range of people rather than just your narrow little piece that you grew up with. I think that's important. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's down to respecting people and anybody, and not just coming up with that cardboard, dare I say, cowboys and Indians cutout that we've all grown up with. You know, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. We know it's not like that, and I think we have to reflect that in our stories and make sure we're giving, you know, people the respect due.
And Susan?
Somebody said one of the guests on one of the panels previously had said something that really stuck with me, and it's about the way that she would write a character description, and the fact that she would leave the character description very sort of open. So if you're a middle-aged white woman, you read it and you see it through those eyes. If you're a 20-year-old Black gay man, you will see the character a different way. And I kind of like that idea of not narrowing down our character description. So when you meet my character in the new novel, you may not read her as a white 40-year-old chick. You might read her as somebody who has mixed ethnicity. Like I'm mixed ethnicity, but you wouldn't know it to look at me. So I try to keep my descriptions that way. Her best friend in the new novel, I tried to describe his skin as coffee colored and things like that so that it would apply to, it's not just a populated world full of white people. And I was, a couple of times I've caught myself bringing in tropes. Like I wanted to bring in a gay character and I found myself bringing in this very flamboyant, over the top. And I stopped and went, no, that doesn't reflect my world. The people I know in my world who are LGBTQ are my neighbors. Like they're just like everybody else. There are a few flamboyantly gay, but it does mean that I'm trying to find my responsibility within the worlds that I'm creating to make sure that I'm bringing in what I know. I don't know, I was thinking about this today too. I don't know that I would ever write a romance between a gay couple because I don't speak for them, but that doesn't mean I can't include those characters in a loving, caring way to present them to the world in a way that is, you know, realistic and honest and not a cardboard cutout, like Janet said.
And Maria, what about you?
I include everybody, and I have sensitivity readers. I mean, and they'll set me straight. You know, I have taken classes where, you know, studying how to write the other, how to work in a story where you include people who just don't think the way you do and who just don't see things the way you do. I mean, it's going to be a very different experience. I love that about, I think it was it Get Out, where there was that one scene when the cops come and you know who you are based on what you think is going to happen when the cops come, when the main character is sitting there with his arms up in the air, you know, because it's a Black man and the police are descending on him. You really know where you're at, where your head is at. If you think the cops are there for good, you know, I was terrified for him. So, and I especially did that for Snowed. It's a YA novel, the bloodline of Yule trilogy in general, because the main character, she's biracial, she's Black, and she has a sort of Celtic European background from her mother, and her father's Black. And, you know, it's a very diverse novel. Very. And to me, I call it a California novel because there's a lot of kids, you know, this is just how California is. And, you know, and there are gay kids in there. And in fact, there's a gay relationship between two boys that develops through the 3 books. And, you know, I have gay sensitivity readers. I have Hispanic sensitivity readers. I have mixed race and biracial sensitivity readers. You know, I just did make sure I get it right because I do want to tell stories that include everybody. I think it's really important, especially if I'm going to set it in California. That would be lame to just have a bunch of people, you know, it's always the white main character, because frankly, you know, I don't think I'm very interesting. But anyway, that's just me.
It's so important, especially in the YA segment. Like obviously it's important across the board, I should say, but I think it's just especially valuable, you know, just as I will say, as the parent of a queer 16-year-old girl, like all the books she loves, you know, like she just thrills at, you know, seeing, you know, people who are familiar to her, you know, even in fantastical settings and in ways that, you know, we certainly, like when I was growing up, there was much less of that.
Well, and I'm right now finishing a book about La Maupin that I think she would love, because she's 16 years old when she's just discovering she's bisexual and badass, and she cross-dresses all the time. So I mean, that, oh my God, I love it. You know, it's but I know the kids who would love it too. You know, they're in my life, and I'm looking forward to getting that out in the world.
Well, speaking of younger readers and our younger selves, if each of you could look back and speak to your younger selves, whether it be 5, 10 years ago or more, is there one piece of creative advice that you would offer to yourself in looking back? Chelsea, why don't we start with you?
I knew you were going to start.
We can come back to you if you'd like.
No, I got it. I'm here. Honestly, and it's going to feel specific to this moment, but to get out of the house, like, I've noticed, like, the more even before the pandemic, the more successful I got, right? And then just sort of being on this grind of having books due, the like less like life experience I was consuming, right? Which makes the work better. And obviously it's a balance because there's also, you know, like you have to do the work and it's a job. But I have found, like, as I revisit this Archie Gretchen series, like, you know, writing the 7th book in that, you know, these books I started 15 years ago, I have found myself being like my Portland references are, you know, like I feel like they're kind of dated, like they're still like my sort of 30-year-old version of Portland, as opposed to, you know, like my version now. And I was like, God, I need to like actually leave the house more and walk around, find some new places to dump bodies, because this is stale, all of these places.
Maria, what about you?
Could you tell me the question again? My brain went flying off another direction.
Not to worry, of course, absolutely. If you could offer one piece of creative advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Yes. Start writing books. Don't fiddle around with games and role-playing games and Lovecraft and all that baloney. Just start writing books sooner rather than later. I can't tell you how many actually well-published, accomplished authors had told me that when I was younger, and I didn't listen to them. But maybe if I walked out of a wall and looked down at myself, first I would go, oh my God, you have red hair. And then, because I was blonde then. And I'd say, look, you start writing books. Start now. Start now and write what you want. Don't listen to your church. Don't listen to anybody. Write what you want. Done.
Janet, what about you? Janet, what about you?
Oh, I'm exactly the same as Maria on this one. Start creating. Don't listen to people when they say, you know, you'll never be good enough, you'll never make any money, you'll never do this, you'll never do that. Just push all that aside, have a little faith in yourself and work. I mean, I'm because I was such I was a big reader right from the, you know, very early on when I was a kid. So I was already teaching myself how books worked, you know, chapters beginning and ending and scenes and dialogue and all that kind of thing. It was all going in there. So I should have, you know, shoulda, but I didn't. And so I'm trying to catch up. So yeah, just get on with it. Go on, do it.
Going.
And Susan, what about you? What is your advice?
It's a lot of the same things, but I think to learn to trust myself, because I would let people talk me, especially certain people in my life, talk me out of things, convince me that I was on the wrong path or I was doing the wrong thing when everything inside of me was screaming, no, 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 no. This is the right thing to do. This is what you want to do. Stop listening to them. So it's really about developing the instinct and to really, I wish I had trusted myself and stood up for myself a lot more 20 years ago. I might be in a different place than I am today, but that would be the biggest thing. If you really, truly believe what you're doing and feel it in your bones, stand up for it.
I think, you know, if you want real horror, there are people out there that will tear you to pieces just with a few words, you know?
Yeah, good read.
So,
good read.
Yeah.
Really good horror.
Well, I think that's where a lot of the darkness comes from, is we've all had those things in our lives that have gone horribly wrong, or people who've treated us badly, and we're willing to go there and explore those things, like you said, all the unspoken things that lead us to that sort of darker nature. But I liked what you guys have said about being uplifting and being brave. The dark stuff does lead us to bravery. It does lead us to finding the way to uplift ourselves and pull ourselves out of the darkness. And I think there's a weird optimism to the darkness that we explore.
Well said, Susan. Well, sadly, we are coming to the end of this panel discussion, but I want to ensure for our viewers who would like to learn more about your work and to follow you, what is the best way to do so online, either on a website and or social media? Susan, why don't we start with you this time?
You can follow me on all social media using @lifeonitsside. My website is lifeonitsside.com. I post all my new artwork and that kind of thing. You can buy all my books, including my new book, The Buddha Cat, on my website at Life on Its Side.
And Janet, what about you?
I'm Janet Joyce Holden just about everywhere. I've website is janetjoyceholden.com. Facebook's Janet Joyce Holden. I think Instagram the same. I'm on the dreaded Twitter as Jan J Holden, I think. So so yeah. Look up Janet Joyce Holden. I should be around somewhere.
And Chelsea?
Yeah, the best is probably my website, chelseacain.com. And I'm on some of the socials, and some of them I have private pages, some of them I don't.
Fair enough.
And Maria?
My website is mariaalexander.net. I am on so many social media platforms. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Lamaupin, Lamaupin. That's my username. I'm on TikTok as Lady Euthanasia. You can, but I think you can find me through just searching my name. And I'm on Facebook, Maria Alexander. I have a regular page and my author page, and there you go. Stalk me.
Well, I want to say a huge thank you to each of you, Susan, Janet, Chelsea, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourselves and your creative experiences with viewers. Thank you to Comic-Con for the opportunity to have this panel with viewers. Again, I've been Barbra Dillon from Fanbase Press. You can find more of our comics, graphic novels, reviews, interviews, podcasts, and panels like this one at fanbasepress.com and across all social media platforms. But again, a huge thank you to the wonderful and talented panelists, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.